Hello and welcome to Bespoke Unit. I'm CP and in this video I'm reviewing the Rocky Patel, the Edge Candela. As per usual, this review is conducted using the Bespoke Unit Cigar Formula, a quantifiable review matrix that you can either use at home for your own reviews, or if you don't have the time to watch the entirety of this video, just look in the description below where you'll find a link to the full final written version of the review, and there will be a PDF version of the Bespoke Unit Cigar Formula which will give you a full overview of the cigar and its characteristics. Furthermore, I stored the cigars in the Boveda acrylic humidor that you can see beside me. We use 69% RH packs and we monitor the cigars with a Boveda butler. The cigars are stored here for a period of 3 weeks to make sure they are properly acclimated and prepared for the review. This is the Edge Candela. So the Edge is quite a successful line from Rocky Patel, and the Edge Candela came out some years ago. As you can see, it has a very green wrapper, and every time I see a green wrapper, I can't help but think of Colombo, you know? Oh, just one more question. Although this is a Toro, and he tended to smoke a smaller Vitola. This is made in Honduras, and that is just about all I know about the cigar. It uses an Habana seed Candela or double claro wrapper. The green color is achieved by flash curing the tobacco in the curing barn, which makes sure that all the chlorophyll is retained. Traditionally, or the word is that candles were used, hence the name Candela, which comes from the Spanish for candle, but I'm not sure if that's true. It's a 6x52 Toro. This is the only Vitola available, and it has very slight box-pressed finish, although it's very slight. As you can see, it's mostly a parejo, but you do get some angular bits on the corners. So like I said, I know very little about the cigar. I think I mentioned that it's assembled in Honduras. I mentioned the wrapper, but the bind and wrapper and the filler, I don't know where it comes from. And by the looks of it, an accordion method was used to manufacture the cigar. So let's just jump straight into the look and feel. So here we're looking at, it's not quite green, it's not like bright green that you get from some St. Patrick's Day cigars. For example, the Camacho has a Candela wrapper cigar that comes out once a year, and that's almost vibrant green. This is more like an olive khaki color. The roll is consistent, you've got no discernible soft spots throughout the body, and it has a nice firm spring. The hue, like I said, is more like an olive khaki. It has quite a sandy, almost coarse texture on the wrapper, but there's not really any teeth. And on a similar note, it's almost like a matte craft paper finish. There's no real shine. It doesn't really give off many oils, although it might give you a slight glimmer in the light. It's not much. And then in terms of the veins, it's quite well put together, but given that there is this matte paper wrapper, it does give a rustic feel whether there are veins present or not, although they are quite slight. In terms of aromas, off the foot, so I noted down here, I got a combination of sort of straw, it's quite creamy, so like double cream, like pure cream, and then a bit of marzipan. There's almost like a sweet almond essence, but that's just off the nose. So if we take a look at this cigar that I've already cut, and I moved the band because it has like a foot band that I moved to the top. So if you take a look at the dry draw here, so the draw is ideal. Flavor is quite mild and bordering on the bland side, but you're looking at a combination of green tea, some custard, and cinnamon. So that marzipan note is really just on the foot. In fact, the green tea and custard is kind of reminiscent of, you might not have heard of them, and I only stumbled upon them by accident. I think they're Japanese, but they're called pocky. They're these sticks, almost like Mikado biscuits in the shape of a baton with, like the Mikado has chocolate on it, but with pocky, they have like a green tea paste on the end, and the dry draw is very, very reminiscent of that. Anyway, I guess the next step is now to light up this cigar, so I'll see you in a minute. So we are finishing the first third. Very nice burn line, and the ash is excellent. Look at that, holds nice and strong. In terms of flavor, it's incredibly herbaceous. We really have an emphasis on that. The mouthfeel has a creamy texture, but then I would argue that there is no cream flavor. There is a slight bitterness, especially near the back of the palate. I would say that that would be sort of woody note, perhaps birchwood, and there's a hint of bay leaf as well. I mean, then you could argue that there are several herbs in this. There are no spices as of yet, but the herbaceousness I would define most primarily as bay leaf, and then there's of course a dried grass note. Overall, that pretty much defines the first third. It's not incredibly complex. It's pleasant. It's easy to smoke. Let's see what happens in the second third before we draw any more conclusions. So here we are, past the halfway point, well into the second third. As you can see, we're starting to get some waviness in the burn line, but we do have this beautiful steely grey ash. In terms of flavour, we have seen some changes. They're not incredible, but there is an evolution nevertheless. Somewhere in the first part of the second third, we were starting to get some cafe latte notes, so the creaminess was there. We had also the gourmand property of the coffee. However, that has more or less faded completely, and the creaminess in the mouthfeel has pretty much gone. Now it's quite dry. It does cause some dryness in the palate. The overall composition of the flavor profile remains very much on the herbaceous side of things. You're going to get some bay leaf still, that has persisted, as well as some thyme. In both cases, they've been quite toasted, they're charred. You do get some of that burnt flavor. It's not going to be like fresh thyme or fresh bay leaf. But we also have the birchwood that has also persisted. So overall, it's very similar to the first third. However, it's just become a little bit bolder than before. So here we are in the final third. And there's been an interesting change. It's far spicier than the first or second third. In fact, there was no spice whatsoever in the first third. And the second third, I was starting to get a little bit, but it wasn't quite there. Here in the final third, we're looking at some nutmeg with coffee grounds. So the coffee sort of cafe latte that I mentioned at the beginning of the second third, that's kind of come back, and now it's just coffee. There's no creaminess. And we also have birchwood. So again, that wood note, the birchwood note, has persisted all the way through the cigar and has only grown in strength, in presence. The herbaceousness, you kind of do still get it a little bit, but it's very much fleeting. It's at the back. It's almost concealed by the spice and the gourmand note of the coffee at this stage. Overall, its complexity, well, this is a very simple cigar. That's not always a bad thing. It gives you a pleasant enough experience all the way down, but it doesn't really deliver many nuances and subtleties that you'd want from a premium cigar. Then again, in terms of price point, that's all right. We'll get to that in a bit. The mouthfeel, it started off very creamy, but then it became coarser as we progressed. It started to lose the smoothness and started to grate on the palate. There is a little bit of weight. Overall, we're looking at a medium body smoke, by the way, which at first you think it's mild, but then it does really grow on you for over half of the cigar. And then in terms of astringence and palate stimulation, so as I mentioned, the mouthfeel does feel a little bit rough, and the reason for this, I'd argue, is that it does cause some dryness. There's additional palate stimulation on the lateral front of the tongue, and at the back you can feel a little bit of salivation, but it's mostly going to be on the dry side. And then in terms of the life cycle, well, you do have some changes in flavor. You do have these new notes that will appear, but overall it does remain consistent all the way through by delivering the birchwood. And then finally, the finish. Finish doesn't linger on the palate for very long. It'll last maybe a couple of minutes, but then it will fade to a sort of generic tobacco cigar note. And the residual scent in the room is actually very pleasant. This is something you could happily smoke indoors with the doors and windows closed, and it's not going to suffocate you. Next, we'll move on to the burn. So in terms of the draw, it's remained consistent throughout the cigar. The temperature is very cool. It provides a very pleasantly refreshing smoke. The angle remains for the most part straight. I haven't touched this up at all, and as you can see, there's only a slight bit of waviness. At the beginning, it was very straight, and then about through the second third, we were starting to get some waviness, but that has corrected itself. And then the ash backbone is very good. You do get some nice bits of ash. You're probably not going to stack this. These did plop off of their own accord after a while, but it is going to give you a nice bit of insulation over the cherry. And finally, we're going to talk about the overall experience of this cigar. So firstly, the band. Not many people like having a band on the foot of the cigar because when they remove it, they don't have any ornamentation. For this reason, I always try and slip them off and put them back near the head of the cigar. However, there are some challenges with that, especially given that this has a very sensitive wrapper that can easily chip away. So take care if you're going to do that. The band itself has a sort of artisanal, rustic look with a creamy color and a texture and a slightly rough cut at the top. It's not a very ornate band. The presentation is quite pleasant. It's kind of laid back and really goes quite well with the cigar. And then the box is very stylish. I don't have one on me, but the box comes in this hand-painted green color, and it has a really nice sort of artisanal craft look about it. It does look pretty stylish, and it looks to be solid wood. Then the value of the cigar, you're looking at about $7.80 for a single. And if you buy a box of 20, you'd probably be looking about $140 to $150. So there is going to be a slight discount on the price of each individual stick, but it's not going to be by much. You're looking about $7 per stick at the very least. And then finally, for the occasion, this isn't going to be a cigar that you would probably choose for a formal occasion, a special event, or even taking to a formal event. This is probably going to be more of a laid-back, chill-out smoke that you can enjoy with your friends at a barbecue or on the porch, or even like perhaps even late morning, early afternoon smoking. It's a good option as well for hot weather, since it's not going to be very overwhelming in terms of spiciness. It's not going to be too heavy, so it's quite easy to smoke in that regard. However, I wouldn't say that it's a good cigar for beginners because it doesn't really give you an insight into the complexities of classic cigars. The best thing really to start with would be more like a Connecticut. Oh, and just one more thing. We have the pairings, and the pairings is this. I've got ash everywhere. The pairings is just something that isn't scored. It's at the bottom right-hand corner of every cigar formula, and this is just a little thought exercise to suggest ways that you could potentially enjoy it. So in terms of food pairings, so either you have them simultaneously with the cigar, or this would be something that you would have before the cigar, so it would be like a digestif. Or even you could have this as beforehand as an appetizer. Consider some things like a ratatouille, so a classic French dish, which is stewed vegetables, including courgettes, peppers, and tomatoes, with herbs, which consist of oregano, bay leaf, thyme. And this, you could really bring out some of the herby properties of the cigar, and they would help extend those flavors somewhat. Otherwise, you could go for another French dish, which is a pot-au-feu, which is a classic beef stew. This bubbles away for several hours with bouquet garni, which is basically a bunch of herbs, which consist of bay leaf and thyme. So there again, you will have the opportunity to be able to marry those herby flavors. And then finally, why not consider something like an avocado salad? It's not going to be quite as, say, green as sort of fresh lettuce, but it's going to have some of the deeper, sort of more rich, fattier, creamy notes that would be more in line with the cigar. And then finally, in terms of beverages, well, usually I would consider things like scotch or rum. I ultimately will always suggest one of these in a specific kind, but in this case, I wouldn't say that that would be the best pairing with this. Instead, consider things like, for example, green tea. Seems obvious, but it's actually a very good choice, or even another style of chai. Those would go well with this cigar. Or if you want something very refreshing, given that the cigar can be a little bit on the dry side, why not go for a beer like a Pilsner or a Pale Ale? And finally, I've also suggested a latte coffee, especially in the second and final third. You're going to get a couple of coffee notes, so you can bring that out, but also the creaminess of the latte will help offset any dryness that you may experience in the cigar. That's all from me today. I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you have, give us a like, give us a subscribe, and leave us a comment if you have any questions about the Edge Candela, or if you have any experiences that you'd like to share, as well as any suggestions for any future videos. Until our next video, why don't you head to bespokeunit.com and see all the other lifestyle subjects that we cover. I'm sure that there'll be something that you will love.